This is Abnormal Entertainment.
2, 3, 4. Walked into the tunnel just to find the light. Hunted for old demons, looking for a fight. Looked up at the stars, seemed to go forever. There must be a way, it all fits together. Fell into the quicksand, held on to the vines. Never could quite color, stay within the lines. Feels like I have wings, I can fly wherever. This is just a way, it all fits together. Finally saw the world through rose-colored glasses. Gonna share my journey to small and large masses. Give up on my life, no sir, me never. This is how I put it together. This is how I put it together. This is how I put it together.
Hey everybody, this is Daniel Garza. Welcome to another episode of Put It Together. I'd like to start as usual thanking my producer, Mr. Kevin Moyers, for all his help and support, and inviting everybody to go check us out at putittogether.com and at normalentertainment.com, where you can find all the shows on the network, as well as our Facebook pages, where you can find everything that's going on, along with extra photos and information about our guest. This morning, we're sitting outside of Scrumptious Cafe and Bakery with writer, director, Mary-Lyn Chambers. How are you doing this morning?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you.
We had the pleasure of working recently on Tijuana, the movie.
We did, yeah, it was magical.
I got to, usually if I get hired and there's no lines, I'm kind of bummed out. I'm like, I want to say something.
Yeah.
But I had that tray.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just felt magical.
You said a lot with that. It's so interesting working. I mean, of course, I understand why actors want to have a line. And I can understand that there's disappointment in that. And I have a sort of tradition of when I'm auditioning actors or I get a vibe from them, I want to invite them to be a part of the project, even if I don't have lines. But for me as a writer-director, I prefer communication and storytelling by showing over dialogue. I use dialogue as a secondary communication tool. To obviously, we're going to need some kind of dialogue to drive the story forward, but I think it's way more interesting artistically if we show. So, and I think it's beautiful that an actor that might have a really simple moment in a scene, but with a tray, you make that a part of how you move through the world and how you communicate who you are. And I think that's brilliant. I'm so moved by what actors can do. So it might have felt like a very small thing for you, but for us, well, for me personally, it was a big thing.
Well, the really cool thing, before we get into your story, the really cool thing that and that's why I invited you on the show, was that although I had this one prop of a tray, and I had just these couple of moments, you allowed me to experiment with this character, which, by the way, I thought I looked really hot in that vest. And
I thought the same thing.
And and the girls did a great job with my hair, but it was just I don't know. You allowed me to just kind of experiment, like what's the relationship with my boss?
Yeah.
And there's I won't give away the movie, but there's a part where I open this curtain,
yes.
And it was just. So I felt so proud to do that for my boss, and I was like, I hope that they capture that. I don't know, it was really cool. Like I said, even for not having a line, I felt like I could really play with him a lot and do a lot.
I'm really glad that you said that, because I do really value what actors bring. In fact, I'm like this with all my artistic collaborators. I really want them to bring something. I think that's a part of crafting a really strong story. And nothing excites me more than seeing an actor deliver really good choice, you know? And I think that actors are really well trained and they understand what storytelling is about. So for me to not allow them to bring their teachings and their wisdom and their talents and their choices to the film and just kind of control everything, then I think you omit the magic that comes forward, but also you don't serve your story.
No.
You know, so it's really critical for me to create an environment for all my talent, both behind the camera and in front of the camera, that I do value the choices that you're making, and you are in a space where that is not only permitted, but it's celebrated.
Yeah.
I also feel I do this with blocking with my actors. I block very much in a collaborative fashion. So often when you're making low-budget films, you may not have had the opportunity to go into the space and to make the world real is to block with the actors and see where their intuition is choosing to go, this way or that way, around the chair from the left to right or around the chair from right to left. Do they feel like they want to walk through this doorway and veer in this direction or that direction? And to me, in the same way that you are crafting performance and story, you're also crafting movement and framing. And to me, it's a very fluid, intuitive thing that I feel really comfortable with in my abilities. And at the same time, I do it on the fly.
Yeah.
But I know what I'm seeing.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, well, the cool thing was watching you work and watching some of the other people in the production. I guess I felt kind of like, I was like, I get what you're doing. I get what you're doing. Because as you mentioned right now, the chair thing, you walk around one way or the other, and one shows power and one shows submission.
Correct.
And as a viewer, you're watching going, no, if he goes that way, then he's less than.
Yes.
But if he walks this way, it's commanding.
Exactly.
So it was really interesting. I really enjoyed watching you work.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it was really cool. So I learned quite a bit.
Oh, nice.
And again, I felt really cool that I could have walked in with the attitude going, oh, okay, well, I'm just background.
Right.
But you made me part of like, I wouldn't say I'm going to say prop, but not in a negative way. I was part of. I had to play. It was an integral part of changing the way the story went.
Absolutely.
So it was like, yes, that's my part.
I love that you took it on in that way.
Yeah, I was cool. And especially at the end. As long as I look good, and that vest was, I wouldn't tell people too much, but the vest was nice and gold, so I was like, I'm gonna pop in this movie. Like, I'm good.
Pop in this movie. But you're right, the note that you delivered on your tray did shift the course of the film. So it's a moment, but sometimes, I mean, it really is just a moment that ignites the story. So it really doesn't take a lot of anything other than a moment.
We're going to tell folks about the movie in a little bit, but first let's hear about you. So, Mary-Lyn Chambers, tell us how you put it together.
Like myself or the movie? What would you prefer?
Your life. Tell us how, where you came from, where you are now, and how you got here.
Well, it's a really long story, but I'll try and be succinct. I was born in Fiji. My father was from the UK, and my mother is fifth generation New Zealander. And my parents were working in Tonga before we moved to Fiji, before I was born. And my sister was born with a deformed foot.
Okay.
And while we were in Tonga, there was not the medical facilities available to help her. And so my parents thought, well, let's go to Fiji. There's at least a hospital there. And so that's how we ended up in Fiji, and that's where I was conceived, and that was where I was born. So I was born in one of the most beautiful countries in the world. The Fijian people are really magical. And so, you know, I was born right away into a mixed society, and my father was a teacher. He was also a high tenor opera singer, and he had an engineering background, so he's really kind of well-rounded. And my mother eventually went into producing radio, so I had very awake parents. They very much followed international news. We listened to the BBC all the time on the radio, and so we were so far away from the world, and yet we were exposed to the world, and I think that's something that really influences who I am today. And then we left Fiji and we went to another small island called Nauru, which is an Australian island. So I started out with a sort of British influenced accent, and then went to Nauru and developed an Australian accent in my English. And then I moved to New Zealand when I was 7, and I left New Zealand when I was 18. So New Zealand became a place for me where they were my most formative years.
Right.
I've lived in some of the most remarkable countries, very caring cultures, free education, free medical, and I would say that New Zealand left the deepest imprint on my nature that led me to being a filmmaker, and it stems around a lot of things, but I'll start with feminism. So New Zealand was the first country in the world where women had the right to vote.
Oh.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know that, actually. And long before other countries actually made it so for them. And it's where prohibition started, too, which is interesting that I'm making a film about prohibition. But in New Zealand, prohibition was driven by the notion of getting the men out of the bars and making sure that some of their pay packet would actually come home to the family, and the mothers could feed and care for home life.
Wow.
Right? So in this moment, women couldn't work. So the men were out working, and on Thursdays they'd get paid, and they'd go to the pub and they would blow their money. So that's why they started the movement.
So it wasn't necessarily government control; it was take care of your family.
Yeah. And whereas in the United States it was really driven by religious views, very conservative, puritanistic religious views, right? So different mindset. So reversing back, so just by virtue of being in a country where women were empowered, it felt like on many levels that it was a mixed society of patriarchy and matriarchy. So as a woman, as a young teen, I was encouraged to not rush into marriage and motherhood, but go out, see the world, and discover who you are, and leave your tread in this earth. And if you're in your 30s and you want to settle down and have children later in life, that's totally okay. So it was really for me it was very normal. But it wasn't until I came to the United States when I realized that gender is going to be my biggest barrier in my career. So in New Zealand, certainly they can do more about gender balance, but at the same time, we've had directors like Jane Campion, Nikki Cairo, so many women directors, and Nikki Cairo is a woman of color. And then we have Taika Waititi, who's obviously a male, but he is a male of color, and he is indigenous. He is Maori, who just did Thor. Okay. Right? Yeah. I don't know if you know. So we have all of these minorities at the top of their game.
Right. But still, you...
long before the United States.
But that still gave, the empowerment as a female.
Yeah.
To be able to do anything you want and not be restricted by time or age or...
Yeah.
That has to carry with you.
Yeah, I think so. Women are restricted by age when it comes to wanting to create life. So if they want to have children and become a mother, then there is going to be a...
Oh, right.
But in terms of... Yeah. I'm really grateful... Certainly in I went to an all-girls high school, and I was very much into drama and English and, all the arts. So I was surrounded by some very influential teachers that encouraged us to explore and encouraged us to try things. And we created plays, and we wrote plays and directed plays. And so I think it was out of that ecosystem that I felt I could go and be anything I wanted to be, and gender was not going to be an obstacle. It took me a really long time to understand how it's played out for me in the United States, and I sometimes question whether or not coming to the United States was good for my career or not. It certainly slowed things down, and I think I would have gotten more support had I stayed in New Zealand. But I also felt like, because my parents raised me to look out into the world view, I have this endless curiosity for other cultures and life and the human experience, and so that's not being satisfied or nurtured by staying in New Zealand. I feel, when I first got to the United States, and I think this sustained me for a really long time, but I felt really alive here because of the can-do spirit of the American people. I can talk a lot about what I don't like about politics and how people of color here are treated and how the native peoples are treated and how the women are treated here. However, I feel very invigorated and energized by how Americans go after their dream.
Yeah.
So it's a mixture of that. That sort of covers the feminist aspect. and I should also point out that New Zealand now, in last November, elected their third female prime minister.
Oh.
She's the youngest female prime minister to ever be elected globally. And she recently announced her pregnancy. She is unmarried, and she lives with her boyfriend.
I just read,
Yeah, Jacinda. She's amazing. She's unmarried. So her live-in boyfriend, and they are in a committed relationship. We call them domestic partnerships because New Zealand's not driven by religion in the way that other cultures are. A lot of people choose not to get married. They just choose to live together without the institution of marriage or the formality of marriage. Yeah. So this is so you're protected under from a lawful standpoint,
right?
So her domestic partner is a host of a television show, so he's going to put his career on hold and stay home and raise the child while she runs the country.
That's pretty cool.
Patriarchy's over in New Zealand, So when I talk about patriarchy or sexism or gender bias or lack of opportunities for minorities, or just talk about equality in the United States, I'm coming from a place of I've already witnessed
what can be done.
I've witnessed it probably 50 years ahead of where America is at. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's also true for the way in which the colonizers in New Zealand, the white people, we call them Pakihas, it's the Maori name for white person, have probably 40 years ago begun powerful acts of apology and instituting programs of inclusion toward the native peoples, the Maori people. There's still so much work to be done, as there is in all of these categories, but I think New Zealand is a world leader in how it has chosen to treat and elevate its native peoples, and that's really, really exciting to me. And the results of that is there's such a tremendous amount of pride about Maoridom. All New Zealanders feel a tremendous sense of pride about our native cultures, and even the island cultures, because we are in the Pacific Islands, and so we have a lot of islanders that mix in with our society, and we mix in with theirs. And so I think the attitude is that we have so much to share with all of these cultures, and it's more beautiful to share and celebrate each other's cultures and enjoy each other's cultures, right, instead of resisting them or pushing them to the sidelines and the fringes of society where they're not happy, they're not celebrated, they're not seen, and this ensues all kinds of worthiness issues and a lot of pain and depression, right? So it's the best we can do, I guess, in a modern sort of aspect. So I'm not making a lot of sense, I don't think.
No, but there's a lot of I've been watching a lot of videos about New Zealand lately, popping up on Facebook and other social sites about everything that New Zealand has versus other countries, and I think it's really interesting. We can definitely learn a lot.
We can definitely learn a lot. And now, like speaking Maori as a language, it was a language that was, in the early 1900s, it was illegal to speak Maori, the native tongue. And now they brought back the language as part of, the government made a formal apology to our people of colour.
We have an audience.
We do. The government made a formal apology for the wrongdoings of the colonizers, of the white ancestors, and then they gave Māori certain pieces of the land back of New Zealand, including the oceans, which is really an empowering thing, and they can do whatever they want to do with that. Also now they speak Māori in the native language in government sectors, on the radio. They have their own channel to speak Māori. And this, preserved a language. And with a language, you preserve your stories. And therefore, by preserving the language, you are preserving culture.
Right.
That could have died out. And we're seeing that many native peoples over the years, over hundreds of years of colonization, they don't exist anymore. Their language has almost died. Their stories have been lost along the way. And I feel deeply passionate about preserving them, and not only preserving their cultures, including them. That's what equality is. There's nothing to be frightened of. It is a beautiful thing that's only going to enrich society. So that's my stand on that.
So
yeah, I have a tendency to just...
No, that's cool, because one of the cool things about not having set questions is the conversation goes so organic and just wherever my guest wants to go. Because I was going to go in one direction, but knowing all this about your country, do you have an interest in telling those stories?
Yes.
In your directing and your productions?
I do, actually. I was raised in Wellington, New Zealand, and pretty close to the country. And I had ponies and was in something called the Macra Pony Club. Macra is a little region on the edge of Wellington. And I want to tell a story about 12, 13-year-old girls with ponies in Macra Pony Club. It will explore a lot of things, I think, in my own, that I want to reconcile with, about that age moment. It would also be in the early 80s, which is kind of when it was set for me. And it will explore, all of my films explore feminism to some degree, inequality to some degree, oppression to some degree, and also kind of in the backdrop of whatever world that I'm in. So yeah, in this one it's going to explore sexual abuse and suicide.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy, but at the same time, it's not going to be a super dense. There's going to be lots of laughy moments in it, because that's how it was. That's how life is, and we got up to a lot of no good when we were riding these ponies, and we had a blast. And we were dealing with sexual abuse and teen suicide, so,
When, speaking about that, because I'm a survivor of sexual abuse from when I was a child. And I tell people there are two roads you can take. You can be a survivor, or you can let it take over. I chose to survive.
Good for you.
And what, from those times and from the stories that you know, what do you think makes a survivor?
It's a really good question. I too am a survivor of sexual assault and of domestic violence. That happened. Both of those things happened as an adult, and they didn't happen when I was a child. And for me, I can only speak from my own personal experience. But in both cases, my will to survive and overcome was so strong that...
Bye.
Have a nice day.
We're losing our audience. Bye,
We're going to
Cruz.
miss you. We're going to miss you. It came from a really deep place within me. I feel like my life, my body, my form, whatever it is, I get up every day and I have such a drive in a particular direction. I'm not sure about all people have that, but I'm very clear that I want to make my life worth it. I want to honor the life I've been given by leaving my tread in this earth, by uplifting others, creating incredible art with incredible people, and feel alive inside, right? So I'll specifically speak of the sexual assault moment because I think that will answer this question more thoroughly.
Okay.
So it was at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was coming home from work. I was working in a restaurant as a waitress and bartender. A couple of us went out for a drink after work, which we did sort of once or twice a month with our colleagues. And then I literally just pulled into my outside of my apartment and was attacked by a 20-something Latino male, very tall, very big, very strong. The moment I saw him, I knew he was going to attack me. And he kind of walked around me and behind me and came up behind me, and I turned because I knew what he was going to do. And as he was lurching for me, I did a kick, you know. I'm sure it was my leg looked like a noodle and not very threatening to him, but I knew I had to do something and show some kind of resistance. And then he put his hand in my mouth and grabbed my body and threw me on the road, head first on the road. And then he got on top of me and pinned me down, and I was like, oh my God, I'm about to get raped. It's happening to me. And I did a self-defense class back in New Zealand when I was in high school. Thank God, because it all came back to me. You have to, in a situation where you are being attacked by a complete stranger or anybody, it is your greatest chance of survival is to get out as soon as you can. If you can show some resistance or do your very best to get away from that situation in the first 2 or 3 minutes, your chances of survival are exponential. So in this class I took, they said turn your fear into anger. And so I did that. And then the next thing on the checklist was think about what you have. Go through the checklist of what you have, like your left arm, you know. And I was like, all right, I'm going through the checklist. My left arm, oh, he's got that pin down on the road. My right arm, he's got that pin down on the road. My left leg and right leg, same thing, pin down on the road. And I was like, shit, I've got nothing. And then he said, no, you have your voice. And then he still had his one hand in my mouth, and I just started screaming and making all kinds of noises, like just whatever I could muster. And it was enough for him to consider that I was too risky for him to overpower, and so he got off me and ran away. And I still had my keys in my fingers, and so I just got up and said, "Focus, girl. Get to the door. Get your house key. Turn the lock. Get in. Shut the door." And then I lost it. So, what I say about that is a lot of different things. Like, my will to live is so strong, and I was damned if I was going to let this guy rape me. I was not going to let it happen. And I don't think that is the initial response, perhaps, that others have. I don't know. But I attribute my survival from that experience because I was raised in New Zealand, because I was raised to live my life fully, and I was taught to defend myself, and I took the time to do that class. And I'm incredibly proud of myself with how I handled that. And I like to share this story with other people in hopes that it will inspire them to maybe take a self-defense class, especially if they have daughters. It might not always save you, but it will allow you the training to make better choices should that scenario come forward.
So after that, wow, because the capacity to have a checklist, that blows me away. Like, just that you had the inner peace to go, okay, wait, outside is chaos, but inside we got to keep it together.
Yeah.
But after that,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you could have just isolated.
Yeah.
What in that moment? I mean, like after the next day or so.
Yeah.
What made you like, okay, I have to go to work.
Yeah.
I have to get up. I have to go do it. What did your mind tell you?
Well, it's a great question. So I did have to go to work pretty quickly. I took 2 days off of work, but I was, I wasn't making very much money, so I couldn't take the time to really rest and recover. So I went back to work while I was still in a state of shock. I gave myself the space to recover, and I asked for what I needed. So one thing I was very clear about, and this again I think is my history in New Zealand, and also I did some deep work with a workshop called the Forum, Landmark Forum, many years ago, and they taught me something, a belief that makes a lot of sense to me, and I used it in this experience with there is what happened, and then there is what you made it mean, right? So I could have made it mean, oh, I shouldn't have been out late at night,
right.
Or maybe, I'd had a glass of wine I shouldn't have had, I shouldn't have gone out with my friends, and I put myself at risk. I could have gone down a real victimhood kind of way.
Yeah.
But let me tell you, I was living my life, I'm unapologetic about it. He's the one that made all the mistakes, and he's the one that attacked me. I never took it on that it was my fault in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
That's a huge...
Yeah, because we could do the blame game or the what if,
Yeah.
and it takes you down an ever-ending road.
It does. And I think young children do take that on because they don't necessarily have the maturity or the understanding of the adult world, right? And so if you're sexually assaulted or molested as a younger person without that level of maturity or training, it could lead you down a very different path. So I also understood spiritually in this moment in my life that I was not making films. I was doing jobs I didn't like. I was making crappy money, and I wasn't living into my purpose. And this stranger came to me in the middle of the night, lifted me up, and whacked my head on the road, and it woke me up. It was like, damn girl, get it together. And it ended up being, I was very aware of it at the time, that this guy woke me up. Literally just metaphorically by whacking my head on the ground, going, well, what are you doing? You're wasting your life.
Yeah.
And I was. And so I gave myself the space to recover from the trauma. It took me a really long time to be in the dark, and I had to have friends sleep with me at night. This guy knew where I lived, so I was always very aware of that.
Right.
And always worried he was going to come back. So my friends took a schedule, and they would sleep with me, which I know is really amazing. I mean, your community is everything in these things. And then sometimes I would go to other people's places. It took me about 3 months before I could sleep alone again, and about 3 months before I could go out in the dark alone. Especially from my home to my car, which was literally like 20 feet. I would run. If it was dark, I would run, and I would just be re-triggered. And then once I'd sort of gotten, I really want to make, actually, before I move out into the sort of like 3 months forward, I really want to point out something that was pretty intoxicating about being in a state of trauma, is you have such clarity about your life force, right? And I remember, it's going to sound really wacky, but a friend of mine was sitting next to me, and it was 2 or 3 days after the attack, and I could see her the pulse of her inside pumping. It was weird, but not weird, right?
Yeah.
People that have seen that, you're like, yeah, I got what you're saying. I saw her life force and heartbeat and blood running through her veins, and it was my pulse, my heartbeat, and my blood. We were all connected. I saw that in a very kind of surreal state, yeah. And it was intoxicating, and I remember thinking, why am I having this beautiful experience out of this intensity, right? But I think that people who are open to that kind of experience can really see that. So I understood the value of my life.
It's basically your energy grabbing on to somebody who's got positive light to hold on.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people forget that. They isolate completely.
Yeah.
So there's no external energy to grab onto.
Yeah.
But when you bring people into your space, they bring in that they're beating for you and they're living for you.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And then it's kind of like
they're carrying you.
Yeah, it's like, let me love you till you love yourself.
Beautiful.
Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So let me live, hold on to my lifeline until you're ready to come out.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I was definitely held.
It just gave me chills.
Nice. I was definitely held, and I needed to be. And, you know, I was surrounded by some very powerful men and women during this time who really let me move through this space. And I was really loved and I was really held. And I think I'm getting kind of emotional thinking about it. But community is everything, you know, friends and family, everything. So choose them well, you know. And sort of like down the track, although I don't thank this strange man for what he did to me, I would never give my power away in that way. But he did wake me up, and within a year, I changed my work situation. I started making films again, which is why I came on, to this earth, and it set my course off my life's journey. I was living in Colorado at the time, and I ended up moving here, finished my film here, and started working for the LA Film Festival and the Independent Spirit Awards, and then now I've made 3 films in the last 3 years, and sort of brings us back to being across from you today. So I look back at that experience as, the gods woke me up and kicked my pants. And
there's this. I've been through a lot of things in my life, and I always believe that in order to find the light or the answers, I have to go through the darkness. So sometimes we figuratively and literally go through the dark to get to the light, and then we can turn around and see a silver lining.
Yeah.
But if you stay in the darkness, you'll never find it. It's never going to appear. And I've walked through a darkness and seen a lot of people sitting there and go, no, you gotta keep going. There's always a cheerleader at the end waiting for you.
Yeah.
There's always somebody willing to hear your story.
Yeah.
And there's no way to tell your story unless you make it all the way out.
That's so true. That's so true. I think that's a really important message. It's a really important message. I think those of us, and you sound like you are one of us, who really takes on the responsibility of being a leader and casting light on those who are moving through darkness, to remind them that there is a beautiful future forward for you, and make the choice. Recognize that now, because that's how you figure out how strong you are and how clear you are, and you understand life and humanity, and go out there and take this really dark, painful experience and do something remarkable with your life.
Silly story, and I'll just really quick.
No, I like silly stories.
I was in, as most of us have been, in the 101 traffic.
Right.
So I was driving on traffic, and I didn't realize that a friend of mine was a couple of lanes over. But I'm so used to traffic. I was in there with my radio, and I used to play my playlist, and I'm singing along. I'm like, we're not going anywhere.
Listening to your own iPod.
Yeah, I'm like, we're not going anywhere.
Podcast.
Might as well have a good time with that. So I'm singing along, and he's driving by, and he passed me, and later on he texts me, he goes, I saw you on the freeway. He goes, but you seem so unbothered by the traffic. And I go, dude, I've been through so many things in my life that an hour of traffic is not the worst thing that because sexual abuse, I'm an AIDS survivor, I'm a cancer survivor.
Oh my goodness.
I live with a colostomy, I live with depression and anxiety and health issue, PTSD. So there's a lot on my plate.
There is a lot on your plate.
So I tell people, by the time I get out and people see me, like there's a lot of duct tape and gum putting me together.
The nets are holding you together.
And
wow.
So thank you for saying that, because I do take my podcast very serious. I take my interviews very serious, because people have stories, and we talked about this in the pre-interview. Like, we all have a story to tell, and it's going to inspire somebody.
I agree.
And just like you filming, well, I'm filming too, but just like you making a film, me hearing people's stories not only inspires me, but I hope will inspire somebody else. Because I'm learning from you right now. And,
that's good.
And that's the beauty of this job.
I want to ask you questions. I know it. Well, thank you for the work that you're doing, because I did read a little bit about you, and I feel that it's no surprise you reached out to me, or that we found each other, even though it was sort of like this moment in a film, is because I really hold high this responsibility and desire to uplift and empower others. It's actually central to why I exist. I even have this on my website. My central mantra is to honor, empower, and celebrate each and every one of us. And, I feel like I meet like-minded people, and for us to tell our stories and to create with other artists, this mantra is very much a part of how I move through the world and how I create my films and how I build community with the people that I make these films with, recognizing that at every step of the way I get to make choices that can uplift, empower, honor, and celebrate others. And that's almost more important than, I want to be a writer-director, blah, blah. Do you know what I'm saying? My writing, directing is a portal in which I can honor, celebrate, and empower, and elevate others.
Cool. All right. So for everybody listening, I'm with Mary-Lyn Chambers, writer and director. And for the background noise, we're going to try and zoom this out. We're sitting outside of Scrumptious Cafe. And when we first sat down, it was really quiet. And then all of a sudden, the day started, I guess, for everybody. But is
that a problem?
No. We'll be able to zoom everything out. That's why we have the mics.
All right, great.
It works. So for those of you who have been following the story, I hope you're enjoying this as much as I am. Mary-Lyn hired me to be in her film. Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was a great film. Tijuana, the movie. After everything we talked about, before we get especially into the movie, in your writing, do you find giving your female characters more power?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm an activist as well as a feminist and game changer, and I see that my writing is a tool for change. So a friend of mine, David Black Placentia, brought this project to me. He's an actor. He was in my film that I did 3 years ago called Debris Escombros, which was also a Spanish language film. And his great-grandfather was Tijuana's chief of police.
Oh.
And he was married to a French-Irish woman called Carmen. So he brought the project to me, and he said, Mary-Lyn, you have complete creative control. I just want to play the chief of police, and I want the wife to be French-Irish, and I wanted to explore tequila smuggling during U.S. Prohibition. And I started studying this subject matter and falling deeply into it, and I was so excited about it. And 2 years later, we finally raised enough money, enough pebbles to make the movie, and we've just finished principal photography. So with that, I was able to create Carmen. We have 2 lead actors, the chief of police and Carmen, the wife. So the story is actually driven by the wife's motivations. I had the chance to make her really intelligent. I chose to make her really intelligent. I describe her as having a very strong business savvy, a massive intellect. She can speak several different languages, so she knows how to be completely self-reliant.
Okay.
And the fact that she's beautiful and sexy is really kind of in the background. The way in which she relates to her own beauty and sexiness is to pull it out as a tool to manipulate men during the 1920s in a Mexican culture where machismo is massive, and she basically manipulates them in order for her to run her own tequila smuggling empire. Right?
Oh, wow.
So that is the larger picture of what this story is about. So it's almost like these are her superpowers, but they're not front and center to her identity.
Got it.
So she is smart, fierce business savvy, has a vision for her life, and she speaks several different languages. Spanish is one, and she's got her hands on the controls. So I could have made her weak and submissive, but that holds no interest to me. And I think male writers and patriarchy and the old boys club have been doing that for 100 years now, and I, alongside many other men and women, want more interesting female roles. But I don't just do that to the female roles, I do it to the male roles as well. I don't think there's any value in creating a film that has really fascinating, captivating female roles and one-dimensional wooden male roles. Then we're just kind of doing what patriarchy has been doing, but we just kind of disempower males, right? Males are just as dynamic. So for me to write 3-dimensional characters is really, really, really important. And I even like humanizing my villains, giving them, even all villains, even if you take a look at Trump, who is a villain in my mind, he got there by all of his life experience, right? That is the way he's organized his identity. So he didn't just show up that way. And I think in so many films there's a lack of depth to the villains, and I don't think that is helping us understand the challenges our society faces if we're just presenting them as cardboard cutouts.
So why in Spanish?
Oh, well, that's an easy one for me. In Mexico, they speak Spanish. So, they speak indigenous languages, I know that, and they also speak English in certain sectors, and Tijuana is no exception. But for me to make a film set in a country where there is a dominant language, and to do it in English just to appease the English speaking sector of the world is ludicrous. It is incredibly important for me to honor the culture that the film is set, and also tell the story through their lens. That's something that's really critical with this project, is to tell the story through the lens of residents living in Tijuana, not the expected point of view of Hollywood or America or the West, because that's what we've been ingesting for decades now, and it's a really one-dimensional portal to look through the world. And I'm more curious about what's happening on the other side. That's where the rich stories are.
And there's also a part which, first of all, thank you for that, because there's something that gets lost in translation. There are certain phrases or the way we say something in Spanish that the moment we try to translate it to English, it doesn't come across the right way.
Yeah.
So yeah, let them have subtitles. I'd rather hear it in Spanish because now I laugh at it. I'm like, oh, I get it. And I'll admit that I'm a big critic when they do movies in Mexican characters in English, and they say and I'm like, we wouldn't say that. Like,
exactly. Well, they wouldn't say that, but also I saw a film and I don't recall the title of it, but it was about the coal mining tragedy. Yeah. And they did it all in English, and then they had Antonio Banderas, who was actually from Spain, play the role. And I remember feeling like I felt sad for the filmmaker. I know they had to make that choice, right? Because I think in that mindset, the consciousness wasn't ready for a Spanish language show. I know that we are going to run into this. We want to turn this into a television series, and we know that we're going to run into this conversation of like, oh, well, you know, do you think you could have your actors say it in English to make it easier for us to sell? And I'm going to fight tooth and nail for it to be in Spanish for all the reasons that you just laid out, but also I like the idea that this project can be in Spanish language for Spanish-speaking viewers, and I think that's a larger audience than English-speaking viewers. And for the English-speaking viewers, I don't want to shut them out either. We definitely feel our film project has the potential to be appealing to all people around the world, no matter where you are. But we want to teach English people that there are other viewpoints and there are other languages, and subtitles are not a deal breaker for you.
Yeah.
You know, rise up, get into it, and you'll find that it's not really a big obstacle at all. And it also honors the country and the culture that you're shooting the project in. I mean, it's kind of like, for me, I feel so strongly about honoring the dominant language in a country, because it would be like me casting a white person or an Arab to play a Mexican. You know, it's like, come on, we're beyond that. Look, and sometimes, you know, circumstances sort of prevail that might be the case, but I'm going for authenticity, I'm going for truth, because that's the only thing that matters. You know, we strive for it, but the accents are hard. The Spanish accent is difficult because people speak in different Spanish accents, and it's hard when you cast. I studied Peaky Blinders. I don't know if you've seen the British TV show, but I studied that set in Birmingham, right? And the actors, brilliant show, but the actors did not get the accent right, because the Birmingham accent is in England is a very specific sing-songy kind of accent, and you know, when they speak, they sort of rise at the end of their sentences like they're asking a question. You're like, I'm from Birmingham, you know, that kind of thing. And they didn't get the accents right, and that's not easy to do. I had a really hard time getting everybody's Spanish accents to sound like Mexico, and I know with some actors I was striking out. And then the Mexican actors that have lived in the United States for a really long time, their accent has altered. Right. So, you know, it's not an easy thing to, as a filmmaker, it's much harder. So I have more compassion now for other directors who are trying to do these stories and are trying to be authentic, but it's really difficult to check off the boxes. But what I'm not going to do is what Ridley Scott did in Exodus, where he didn't cast it, he casted like English, Saxons, Caucasian people to be Egyptians, and with pompous British accents. Like, the whole thing was just laughable, you know. And I don't think we live in a time where that's acceptable. Yeah,
there's definitely an art to Spanish. I'm from Monterrey, where we roll our R's. Anything with an R has 20 R's in it. Right. So Monterrey has to come out. But moving to the States, very young, I can speak different Spanish dialects and get them kind of like, and I have a good ear, I guess, because I grew up Spanish and English at the same time. I have a good ear. I can pick up people's accents quickly and kind of adapt to them. But I've been to auditions where they're like, well, we need this kind of Spanish. I'm like, okay, well, give me a second. I'll put something on YouTube. I'm like, okay, I got it. But I could tell some of the guys had a little more difficulty with the Spanish than others, and finding the rhythm of the words, because Tijuana has their own little way of speaking. But for the people watching and listening, being a fan of novelas, it had a very telenovela feel to it.
Oh, well, that's a compliment, considering I'm from New Zealand and Fiji born. And, well, that's beautiful, you know. I mean, I'm very sensitive to the notion that I am a Caucasian writing this story. But I hire women and minorities in the majority of leadership roles, behind the scenes and in front of the scenes, and so I feel very much like where I have my strengths as a storyteller, and where I fall short, I lean on others. You know, I have a remarkable Mexican producer, Cynthia Bravo, who is fluent and was one of the helpers with all of the Spanish translations. We had a couple of people translate. It's interesting about the translations. Everyone's got their different take.
Yeah.
Because it's so subjective, right? And then of course David was born in Tijuana, lived on the streets in Tijuana, and then moved to the United States. So I had a Spanish translator on set working with me, and so. And my editor has to be a fluent Spanish speaker. So I know that what I bring strong storytelling abilities, and I bring other people that bring skills that I don't have, to make sure that I am getting it as right as I can possibly get it. And then the other thing that is central to how I tell story is to make sure that I am honoring the culture and striving to get it right. And I think that is the key thing if you are telling a story about another culture that's not your own native culture, is having that as a central motivation. And I think that Coco is an example of something getting done right. And the list of examples of films made in Hollywood where they get it wrong is really, really wrong. So I think if a director or storyteller is making that effort to honor the culture and get it right, that's the distinction about whether or not you have a place in that story as a storyteller or not.
Before we continue, we've got to the point of the show where I ask my guests to share some words of wisdom with my listeners and viewers. Mary-Lyn Chambers, what words of wisdom do you have for the listeners?
I know I draw a blank, and I don't usually draw a blank. I think if I could talk to my younger self, I would say the only thing that's really important in your life from beginning to the end is to lean into the things that excite you and lean away from the things that don't. That's really it. And when I say that, things that excite you, whether it is an art project, whether it is a person, whether it is a school that you want to go to, whether it is a dog walking up the street and you want to just cuddle it or say hello to it or say hello to a small child. If it is exciting you, fulfill that. If it is not exciting you and you get this, say someone brings me a project, do you want to write and direct this? And I read the script and I just feel meh about it. Or I don't like it at all. I'm not going to fight for it or present myself toward that. And to explain it a little bit more, I've learned the hard way. I have a background in event producing, and people are like, "Oh, do you want to produce this event? Do you want to, And the ones that I feel really excited about are the ones that end up bringing something magical that has really nothing to do with the event. You end up meeting someone that changes your life, or you meet someone that you end up working with 10 years later on a project, or that person hires you on a project. Like, you build this sort of community and friendship and network, right? So it's nothing to do with the event. And it ends up being magical. I was offered an event where I didn't feel excited about it, but I needed the money, so I took the job. I had an abusive person that I was working with. So stressful. I ended up in the hospital and just full of stress. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And when you feel excited about something, that's your inner guidance system, that's your spirit, whatever, your intuition guiding you. Listen, because she is always right. Always. And it also keeps you safe, right? Even on that night that I was attacked, I knew something was going to go down, and if I had listened to that, I'd have just got back in my car and locked the door, right? Listen. And same with people, same with anything else. So lean into the things and people that excite you, and lean away from the things that don't. Whatever it is. I wish someone had told me that.
Beautiful. That's awesome. Well, we're getting down to the end of the show. So before we go, where can they find you? Where can see some of your projects?
Cool. So I have a website, MaryLynChambers.com, MaryLynChambers.com. And I'm also on Instagram at Mary-Lyn Chambers. And so follow me if you'd like. I have a film actually that's screening this weekend in Denver at the Women's Film Festival there. It's called The Plural of Blood. It explores a mixed race couple living in Los Angeles. He is a Latino LAPD officer, and she is an African American, very successful businesswoman. And it explores the pressure of an unarmed shooting in their neighborhood and how that deteriorates their marriage.
Wow.
It's an amazing project, and I made it with some remarkable collaborators. And Ludovica Isidori, my cinematographer on the film that you and I worked on that. So that's screening this weekend. And then I have another film, Debris Escombros, that I made 3 years ago, where I met David, who brought this project to me. So it goes back to what I was saying about lean into the things that excite you. People bring people to you all the time, and so Debris Escombros did really well on the festival circuit. We were in 4 programs at the Cannes Film Festival. It won a bunch of awards, went to the UK, all over the place, Toronto. So that film I am hoping to release later in the year. Otherwise, if anybody wants to see my films, bring me an email from my website and I'll send them privately.
Now, I don't know if you knew, but David and I worked together.
What?
You didn't know that?
No, I didn't know that.
I worked on a school project, ColArts. I played Pancho Villa, and he played a doctor on it. It was a short web series. It was 5 episodes, and I played Pancho Villa in the 5 episodes, and he was a doctor on the show. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So we knew each other, and when I got the call sheet, and I looked at the names, I'm like, oh my God, David. And I said to him, I'm like, we're going to be working with each other tomorrow. So yeah, everything circles around. It's
so good. And I know do you have another question? Because I know you're right.
No, go for it. Go.
I think that's another thing. The joy of life is the people you share this life with. I think that building community and nurturing your community and celebrating your community and being grateful when they come forward and work on your projects is really, really important to me. So your reputation is your most powerful currency as a filmmaker or as anything. And so whatever job, career, or community leader, your reputation is your strongest currency, and it is the only thing you can control. So no matter whether you do a job where you're an actor with no words and you're carrying a message on a tray, or whether you are event producing an event you don't really care about, show up and be the very best that you can be. Deliver a project where people are so impressed by your abilities that they want to hire you again, because it will come back and pay off
Yeah.
dividends.
Yeah, I used to tell people, I'm from Texas, people in Houston who were wanting to move to LA. I would always tell them, if you move to LA and you're an extra or you're a background and you're supposed to be a blur in the back,
Yes.
be the best blur
Yes.
you can possibly be.
Exactly.
Yeah, and oddly enough, it's moved me up. And sometimes I get to be the blur, and sometimes I get to be up front.
Yeah.
And you just do what the best you can.
Yeah.
And well, I look forward to working with you again. And
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time this morning to talk to me and my viewers and listeners. For everybody listening and watching, I am sitting here with writer director Mary-Lyn Chambers. We are at Scrumptious Cafe. I want to make sure we shout out to them because it's been they have good coffee.
They do have good
and,
coffee. They're very nice people that work here.
And the place next door got noisy after we started talking. Again, thank you.
Thank you very much.
For those of you, I will be posting the links on the Facebook page, so make sure you go check it out. Go to abnormalentertainment.com. You can find all the shows on the network. Thank you, Mr. Warriors, for all your help and support. And thank you, Mary-Lyn.
Thank you.
And for everybody listening, this is Daniel Garza saying, hey, put it together.
This is how I put it together.
This is how I put it together.
This is how I put it together.
Subscribe to Put It Together on iTunes, Stitcher, and at abnormalentertainment.com/putittogether. Find Put It Together on Facebook and tweet Daniel at Lil Messican, LILMESICAN. And for more podcasts, comics, books, movies, and more, head to abnormalentertainment.com.
You've been listening to the Abnormal Entertainment Network.